The night Stellan Voss told her she was nothing to him, Thora didn't cry. She stood in the marble foyer of his penthouse, the one she'd helped him furnish, the one where she'd learned to make his coffee the exact way he liked it, 2 sugars and no milk. And she listened to him say the words like he was reading from a contract. "You should go. Don't come back. We're done here." His voice was steady. His eyes were already somewhere else. She picked up her coat from the chair by the door. She didn't slam it on the way out. She cried in the elevator. Alone, between the 42nd floor and the lobby, with her fist pressed against her mouth so no one could hear. That was 3 years ago. Now Thora Ellison woke up every morning at 6:15 because that was when Addie started talking in her sleep. Not crying, talking. Full sentences, sometimes in the middle of what sounded like a very important negotiation with someone named Mr. Bumbles. Thora had never met Mr. Bumbles. She suspected he was a sock puppet Addie had made at daycare and then lost, because for 2 weeks straight, her daughter had asked for him with the specific grief of someone who'd lost a family member. Thora would lie there in the gray morning light, listening to the small voice from the next room, and she would feel the particular texture of her life. Not bad, not broken, just small in a way that she'd made her peace with. She owned a coffee shop. It was called Groundwork, and it sat on the corner of Hillard and Mace in Portland, Oregon, with a hand-painted sign she'd done herself in blue and cream and a chalkboard out front where she wrote a different quote every week. The regulars had started requesting their favorites be repeated. Old Mrs. Hannigan wanted the Mary Oliver one back. Thora kept telling her soon. The shop opened at 7. She dropped Addie at her neighbor Bet's apartment at 6:45, walked the 4 blocks in her coat with the broken zipper, unlocked the door, and started the first brew of the day. This was her life. She had built every inch of it herself. She did not think about Stellan Voss. She had developed a very efficient system for not thinking about him. Every time his face tried to surface, she redirected to her espresso inventory, or Addie's pediatric checkup schedule, or the leak under the back sink that the landlord still hadn't fixed. It worked 80% of the time. The other 20%, she let herself remember only this, that she had been 29 years old and stupid with love, and that she had survived it, and that Addie existed because of it, and that Addie was the best thing that had ever walked into her life on unsteady toddler legs. So even the memory had a silver lining, if she held it right. What she never let herself remember, the way he used to say her name. The way he looked at her that first week, like she was something he couldn't quite figure out and was determined to. She was very good at not remembering that. The trouble started on a Tuesday, which Thora had always found to be the most treacherous day of the week, not dramatic enough to be a Monday, not far enough along to feel like progress. She was restocking the pastry case when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, Seattle area code. She didn't answer unknown numbers before 8 a.m. She set the phone face down and finished arranging the croissants. It buzzed again, then again. She picked it up. Unknown. Groundwork coffee. This is Thora. Silence. Then, you changed your number. Her hand went cold around the phone. She knew that voice. She would know it at the bottom of the ocean. She had spent 3 years convincing herself she had forgotten it. Yes, she said. Very calm. She was proud of herself for that. I need to talk to you. I'm at work. I know. I've been a pause. The kind of pause that meant he was choosing his next words carefully, which was unusual for Stellan Voss, a man who generally said exactly what he meant with the precision of someone who charged $400 an hour for his opinions. I need to see you, Thora. She closed the pastry case. Her reflection looked back at her, pale and small-eyed in the curved glass. No, she said, and she hung up. Her hands were shaking. She put them flat on the counter until they stopped. Marcus, her morning barista, came in from the back with a bag of Ethiopian yirgacheffe and took one look at her face and said, "You want me to handle the register today?" "I'm fine," she said. "Sure," he said, in the voice of someone who was absolutely not going to argue with her. She told herself she wasn't going to think about it. She thought about it all day. Stellan Voss was the CEO of Voss Capital, which managed roughly $8 billion in private equity and had offices in Seattle, New York, and London. She knew this not because she followed him, She did not follow him. She had specifically structured her internet habits so that his name did not appear in her feeds, but because he had been profiled in the Portland Business Journal 3 months ago, and old Mrs. Hannigan had left the magazine on her usual table, and Thora had been ambushed by his face on page 42 while trying to clear the cups. He looked exactly the same. That had been its own small cruelty. She knew, in the way that you know things you don't want to examine too closely, that he had gotten her number from somewhere she hadn't anticipated. She had changed it the week after she left Seattle. She had told only her mother, Bet, and her obstetrician. The obstetrician. She had gone to that appointment 6 weeks after leaving Stellan's penthouse. She had sat in the paper-covered exam table and listened to a heartbeat like a hummingbird and cried for 20 minutes and then gotten very quiet and started making lists. Addie did not know who her father was. She was 2 years and 8 months old, and her current understanding of family was that she had a mama and a Bet and a Mr. Bumbles somewhere in the ether. She accepted this the way small children accept most things, completely, without question, with her whole soft heart. Thora was not ready for that to change. She called her mother that night after Addie was down. "He called me," she said, without preamble. Her mother, Deb, was 61 years old and had raised 2 daughters alone after Thora's father left when Thora was 7, and she did not panic about things. She said, "How did he get your number? I don't know yet. What did he want? To see me." A pause. Then, "What do you want to do?" Thora looked at the baby monitor on the counter. The small screen showed Addie curled around her stuffed elephant, thumb near, but not quite touching her mouth. She'd nearly kicked the habit. "I want to pretend I never got that call," Thora said. "That's one option," her mother said carefully. "But?" "You know what the but is." She did. She'd known what it was since the moment she'd heard his voice. She just needed someone else to not say it so she could keep pretending she didn't. He showed up at the shop on Thursday. She saw him through the window first, tall, dark coat, the particular way he stood on a sidewalk like the sidewalk should be grateful. And for one wild second she considered locking the door and turning the sign to closed and pretending she wasn't there. Then she thought about the 4 customers at the window seats who would have very reasonable questions about that, and she straightened her apron instead. He came in, and the little bell above the door rang, the same as it always did. He looked around the shop first. That was a Stellan thing, cataloging a room before engaging with it. And then he saw her, and something crossed his face that she couldn't name and didn't try to. "Thora, we open at 7, she said, even though it was 9:30 and they were clearly open. "You're fine." He came to the counter. He looked older than the magazine photo. There were lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there before, and he looked like he hadn't been sleeping well, though his suit was immaculate because Stellan Voss would wear a wrinkled shirt approximately never. "I'll have a coffee," he said. "What kind? Whatever you recommend." She turned to the espresso machine so she didn't have to look at him and made him a cortado, because it was what she would have made him 3 years ago, before she knew better, when making his coffee felt like a language they shared. She set it on the counter between them. He didn't pick it up. "My father died," he said. She looked at him then. Stellan's father had been Eriksson Voss, patriarch of the Voss family, and the architect of everything Stellan had become, which included both his considerable competence and his considerable coldness. Thora had met him once, at a dinner party she shouldn't have attended, where he'd shaken her hand and looked through her like she was a window. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it the way you mean things that are true and complicated. "He left me controlling interest in the company. My sister Renata is contesting it." He picked up the cortado. Set it down without drinking. It's been a difficult few months." "Why are you here, Stellan?" He looked at her directly then, with that gray-green gaze that had always unsettled her because it felt like he was reading something she hadn't written yet. "I went to find you," he said, "after you left. About 8 months later. I came to your apartment and your neighbor said you'd moved." Thora said nothing. "I looked for you for almost a year," he said. "I didn't." He stopped, started again. "I said things to you that night that I've spent 3 years trying to justify and I can't. I was wrong. I was. He pressed his thumb against the side of the cup. I had just found out my father had been taking capital from the fund without disclosure. I was trying to contain it. I took it out on you because you were there and because I was a coward. The shop noise continued around them, the hiss of the steam wand, a burst of laughter from the window seats, Marcus calling out an order, the world indifferent as ever. That's not enough, Thora said quietly. I know. You told me I was nothing to you. I know. His voice didn't waver, but something behind it did. It was the worst thing I've ever said. I knew it the second you walked out the door, and I have known it every day since. She looked at her hands on the counter, the ring she'd bought herself after Addie was born, a thin band of rose gold with a small garnet, because she'd wanted something on her hand that was hers alone. She thought about all the times in the last 3 years she had been angry at him, quietly, in the margins of her days. The anger that didn't roar, just smoldered like coals in a grate. She had earned the right to her anger. She was not ready to give it up for a coffee shop confession. I need you to go, she said. I need to work. He nodded. He picked up the cortado and took a sip, finally, and left $6 on the counter, which was twice what it cost, which was a Stellan thing too, and she was furious at herself for noticing. She called her mother again that night. He came to the shop, she said. Oh, Deb said, which contained multitudes. He apologized, said he looked for me. Do you believe him? Thora considered this genuinely, because her mother deserved a genuine answer. Yes. Which is the problem, isn't it? What about Addie? There it was. The question she'd been orbiting all day, the one she kept not landing on, like a plane circling an airport in the dark. He doesn't know, Thora said. He doesn't know she exists. Deb was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, that's something you're going to have to decide about, sweetheart, before someone else decides it for you. She didn't sleep that night. She lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought about the night Addie was born. January, ice on the roads, Bet driving her to the hospital because Deb was 2 states away and there was no one else, and Thora gripping the door handle the whole way and telling herself that whatever happened, she would be enough. She would be enough on her own. She had watched her mother be enough on her own, had seen what that cost and what it built, and she had decided she could do it too. She had done it. She was doing it. But lying there at 2 in the morning with Stellan Voss back in the city and his voice back in her skull, she thought about Addie's questions. They had started just recently. Small, curious questions. The kind that pricked. How come Jonah at daycare has a dad and I don't? And Thora had said, simply, lots of families are different, baby, because Addie was 2 3/4, and the fuller answer required more words than either of them had yet. She thought, I am not the only one who gets to make this decision. She thought, I hate that that's true. She thought, I love her so much it makes my chest hurt, and I would do anything to keep her exactly as she is. This small, perfect creature, with her Mr. Bumble's grief and her sleep negotiations, and I am terrified that telling the truth will change something I can't change back. She got up at 4 and went to sit in Addie's doorway, not going in, just watching the small rise and fall of her daughter's breathing. I'll figure it out, she told herself. I always do. Stellan came back the next morning. He didn't come inside. He waited outside on the sidewalk until Marcus went out on his break, and then he knocked on the glass and held up a cup from the coffee cart 2 blocks down, which was a very Stellan move, acknowledging that he couldn't buy coffee from her right now, so he'd bought it elsewhere, a small white flag disguised as caffeine. She went outside. The morning was cold, that particular Portland gray that softened everything. She kept her arms crossed. I'm not here to pressure you, he said. I had something I needed to say, and I didn't get to say it yesterday. She waited. I'm not a good man, he said. I know that. I've known it for a long time. I'm too controlled, and I make decisions that hurt people, and I justified a lot of things I shouldn't have, because I was raised to believe results were more important than how you got there. He looked down at the cup in his hand. But I'm trying to be different. I've been trying for 3 years, and I don't have a lot to show for it yet, except that I know the difference now, between who I was and who I want to be. Thora looked at him for a long moment. The morning traffic moved behind him. A woman with a stroller went around them on the sidewalk, giving them the wide berth of someone recognizing a serious conversation. "Stellan," she said, "there's something you need to know." She watched his face. "I have a daughter," she said. "She's almost 3. Her name is Addie. She was born in January, 14 months after I left Seattle." The math was not subtle. She watched him do it, watched the exact moment understanding arrived. He went very still. The way he went still when something large was happening, not away from it, but into it. That same stillness she'd seen when he was absorbing information, processing, making himself a container for something enormous. "She's mine," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was quiet. "Careful." "Yes." He looked away, down the block, at nothing. His jaw worked once. "I didn't know," Thora said. I knew, obviously, when I found out I was pregnant, but I had just left you. You'd told me I was nothing. I was in no position to." She stopped. "I made the decision I thought was right at the time. I made it alone because I had to." He turned back to her. His eyes were bright, which was the only sign, because the rest of his face was very controlled. But she knew his eyes. She had always known his eyes. "I want to know her," he said. "I know. I'm not going to fight you. I won't lawyer up and make this a battle. That's not what I want." He was choosing each word with deliberate care, like he understood that the wrong one could break something that wasn't yet fixable. "I just want the chance to be there, in whatever way you'll allow. For her, not for whatever this is between us. For her." Thora thought about every version of this conversation she'd run in her head in the last 48 hours. She hadn't gotten to one where he said this. "She asks about fathers," Thora said quietly. She just started. "Comes home from daycare with her little observations." She felt something loosen in her throat. She deserves an answer I can actually give her. He said nothing, just waited, which was maybe the most mature thing she had ever seen Stellan Voss do, because he was a man who defaulted to action, and he was making himself still for her. "One coffee, at a table, not the counter, on a Saturday when the shop is quieter. You and me and Addie, and if she doesn't like you, we stop there." "Okay," he said. "Just that. And Stellan." She looked at him steadily. "If you disappear on her, if you do to her what you did to me, I will make sure you never set foot in her life again. I don't care how many lawyers you have." "I won't," he said. "You can't just say that. I know." He held her gaze. "I know I have to show you. I'm asking for the chance to." She thought she wouldn't sleep that Saturday morning. She thought she'd lie awake cataloging all the ways this could go wrong. She slept until Addie woke her at 6:15 mid-negotiation with Mr. Bumbles. Thora lay there, listening, and then she got up and made Addie her oatmeal with the little brown sugar stars on top, and she brushed Addie's hair and let her pick her own outfit: purple leggings, a striped shirt, a sequined headband that clashed with everything. Perfect, and she explained in the simplest terms she had that they were meeting someone at Mama's shop today. A man named Stellan. He was someone Mama used to know. Addie said, "Does he like coffee?" "He does," Thora said. "Okay," Addie said, and went back to her oatmeal. That was the thing about small children. They made space for things before they knew what the things were. They hadn't yet learned to be afraid of meetings. Every new person was still just a person. Stellan was already there when they arrived, sitting at the corner table with his hands around a cup. Her coffee, not the cart down the street, which meant he'd knocked, and Marcus had let him in, and she was going to have words with Marcus about that, and also maybe give him a raise, because she was obscurely grateful. He stood when they came in. Of course he did. His eyes went to Addie immediately, and then he did something she hadn't expected. He crouched down, a full-grown man in an expensive coat, to put himself at eye level with a 2-year-old. "Hi," he said. "I'm Stellan." Addie looked at him with the frank and fearless appraisal of very small children. She looked at his coat. She looked at his face. She looked at his hands, which were folded in front of him in a way that was probably the most non-threatening posture Stellan Voss had ever arranged himself into. "I like your shoes," Addie said. He looked down at his shoes, which were dark leather, polished, and very boring. "Thank you," he said with complete seriousness. "I like your headband." Addie touched the sequin thing on her head. "It has stars." "I can see that." Very impressive. Addie considered this, then turned to Thora and said, in the loud whisper of someone who had not yet learned to modulate for audience, "He's nice, Mama." Thora felt something move in her chest. Deep and strange, the way things moved when they were shifting into new positions. I know, she said. They sat at the corner table for 2 hours. Addie consumed a children's hot chocolate and 3 of the small butter cookies. Thora kept behind the counter for child-sized emergencies, and she talked about Mr. Bumbles for a significant portion of that time. And then she showed Stellan how she could snap her fingers. She couldn't quite snap her fingers, but she was practicing with total conviction, and Stellan watched her with an expression that Thora could only describe as quietly devastated, in the way that wasn't sad, in the way that was the opposite of sad. When Addie finally ran out of steam and climbed into Thora's lap and tucked to Thora's chin, Stellan looked at the two of them and said, in a voice that was measured and careful but not quite steady, "She's extraordinary." "I know," Thora said. "You did that." She looked at him. "What? All of it. On your own." He held her gaze. "I don't say that to excuse myself. I say it because it's true and because you should hear it said." She didn't know what to do with that, so she looked down at Azadi's headband. Instead, the ridiculous sequined stars, catching the light. "We'll take it slow," she said. "Yes, I mean it. She's not a project or a problem to solve. She's a person. She needs consistency, not intensity. Understood." And Stellan. She met his eyes, both of them, equally. He blinked. "I'm sorry? If there's ever another child, another situation, any child in your life, you treat them equally. She doesn't get less of you because she's first or because you didn't know." She kept her voice even. "I need that to be a condition. A real one." Something shifted in his expression, recognition maybe, that she was anticipating something, naming it before it could happen. "There's no other child," he said. "There won't be anyone else receiving. Thora, she's my daughter. She will not have to compete for anything." "Good," she said. "Then we understand each other." Addie fell asleep in the car on the way home, the way she always did in the afternoon, like someone had simply unplugged her. Thora drove with one hand and kept the music very low and felt the quiet of the city moving around her. Her phone buzzed on the seat. She glanced at it at a red light. "Thank you for today." Stellan. She put the phone down. The light went green. She was not ready to forgive him. That was true, and she was going to sit with its truth for as long as it needed. Forgiveness was not a door you could walk through on someone else's schedule. But she had watched him talk to her daughter for 2 hours. She had watched him crouch to Addie's eye level and compliment the impossible headband and listen to a very detailed story about a lost sock puppet with the full attention of a man who was deciding, moment by moment, who he wanted to be in this child's life. She did not know yet who Stellan Voss was going to be. He did not know either. They were both standing at the edge of something new, squinting at the shape of it. But Addie would know her father. She would have that answer when the questions came, and they would come, and they would get bigger as she did. Thora had made her peace with being enough on her own. Now she was making peace with the harder thing. That enough was not always the same as everything, and that loving her daughter meant letting the story keep going, even the parts she hadn't written. She pulled into the parking space behind their building and cut the engine. Addie slept on in the back seat, boneless and perfect and star-headed. Thora sat there for a moment in the quiet. Then she picked up her phone and typed back. She asked about your shoes the whole way home. She sent it before she could think too hard about it. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then, "I'm going to buy better shoes." She laughed before she could stop herself. A short, real sound in the quiet car, the kind that surprised you. She looked at her daughter sleeping. She looked at the ordinary Portland sky outside, gray and close and hers. Whatever came next, she had built herself something real. A shop with blue paint and a leaky sink and a chalkboard that needed updating, and a life that was small in the way she'd chosen, and a daughter who collected star headbands and grieved sock puppets, and had, in 20 seconds flat, made Stellan Voss crouch on a coffee shop floor and compliment sequins. The next part was not yet written. She was learning slowly to be okay with that.